Do you think we do a good job of preparing new folks that?
I honestly don't. I think the answer is no, but think I don't know of a way to prepare somebody except by honing their ability to be flexible. I don't. You just have to be able to think on your feet and think outside the box and think ahead.
What were some of the out of the box moments for you that day?
Calling IT, I have to say, was my shining crown, and it's the thing I was most proud of, stupidly, because I really, if CAD had crashed, oh my gosh, I have no idea how we would have survived that, like no idea. And to have them there gave me such a sense of, okay, everything will be okay with this system now. It's one thing I don't have to worry about, and that the system was the biggest concern that I had, because I knew the guys in the field, they could do what they were doing all day long, and they're very good at what they do, and that, so it wasn't a.
We as dispatchers, police officers, first responders in general, we tend to minimize what we do. And I see you had just said it was probably one of the silliest things that I did, but it's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah.
From my perspective, it's brilliant.
It is
excellent
outside of the box.
It's very outside of the box, and it's a precautionary measure that you never considered, but somehow something popped into your brain, and it could have been my CAD lagged, and I don't want it to lag. What can I do to solve this problem? And you're able to masterfully solve, at least not necessarily solve the lagging, but to have that the physical support of IT and the mental gladness that you have a little bit of insurance. Because what do I do if? And that's, I think, what first responders are supposed to think. What do I do if?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's an accurate point, and it's there are only so many of those questions you're able to answer for yourself. So one of the questions that you should ask is, what do I do if I don't know what to do? What's my response going to be? And you have to have a confidence in your own ability as a human being, especially as a dispatcher, to know that you have that ability, like a cat, to land on your feet and to know which way you're going to go. That's.
I'm highly interested in working this incident and going through it, but we're kind of off on a very important point, and that is training.
Yeah.
Experience is you can't gain experience, or a wise person once told me there's only one thing that trumps experience: more experience.
This is true. Is that wise person?
Yes, it is. Kim Turner. But part of that connection to experience is training.
Yes.
You have been a dispatcher for nearly 30 years, or 30 years, and you have amassed, I'm certain, a lot of training throughout those years.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna ask a down and dirty question. The training that you had, was there anything specific to, was there anything specific to active shooter that you had, or if you could tell me some of the things that you did maybe prior to the incident that you can recall that maybe was significant, or at least helped you through that?
Honestly, what comes to mind is having had the experience of working closely with our SWAT team. And because I started at the same time where some of this people who are now sergeants of the SWAT team, and we were fairly close as professionals, and had a really good working relationship. Mm-hmm. In the past, I had been able to go observe their training so that I could see what they were doing, how they were maneuvering and organizing themselves, and it helped me understand from a dispatcher perspective what my expectations were going to be for myself and from them. I think being able to integrate training time with other divisions that you will be working with on an incident such as this, I think is imperative. It's absolutely necessary.
And I'm assuming that beyond the observational role.
Yeah, I think when I went to tactical dispatcher school,
Mhm.
they had us do scenario training, and I got to be a bad guy. That's me to
They
the
needed
core.
somebody to shoot at.
Well, yeah, they did, and I'm kind of a large target. And being able to be sort of hands-on in a scenario really gives you a different perspective. And I think that's something that can flow over into a training with another division within your department, like SWAT or like the K9 unit or whoever. And I think being able to understand each other's, not necessarily do them, but understand them and understand what they expect of themselves and what they expect of you is really, really important.
In summary, I want to tell you what I think I got from what you just said.
Yes, please.
That not only is it important to be working with and training with others, other units, SWAT or K9, explosive ordnance disposal, whichever the case is.
Right.
But not only as your traditional role, I'm a dispatcher, so I'm going to play a dispatcher role in this particular scenario. But perhaps I am going to be with a SWAT officer or a SWAT team so I can get the perspective of what they're feeling, of what they're seeing, or what they're going through.
Yep.
And so you get this cross training, very much so in the dispatch center, where the dispatcher intake can also be the dispatcher on the radio.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's a good analogy because it helps to make clear why our team that day worked so well together. We all understood each other's roles because we've worked them, and so it was easy to know what they can do for you and what you should do for them. Made it much easier. Good point.
Well, I did that only through my conversation with you. Really, and I think the brainstorming, we're so much smarter together than individually.
Yeah, that is true.
No doubt.
That is true. Here at Alvo, we have department training, which happens every 3 months, I think, where everybody has to go. The chief stands up and gives sort of a state of the department every 3 months, and then they kind of break out and do training. And they had patrol training this past time that was hot stops and some sort of tactical something. And there was no need for dispatchers to go because it was all out at the range and with shooting guns, and it was something we don't do. But the new dispatch supervisor, Amy, had never seen anything like that. And so she went to see, and to me, that's invaluable. Like, to know what's happening on the other side of the radio makes us better dispatchers.
But I think it's kind of funny because I think it's important that we actually go in the field, because one of the things that as a cop I know, but as a dispatcher I wouldn't have, is just how loud the gunfire is.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes,
that's why you
that's
have to
actually-
repeat
Yep.
so much.
Yeah.
And I think we get frustrated because why do I have to tell them like 85 seconds? Because they can't hear
Because
you.
the
Yeah,
windows
because they
rolled
can't
down
hear you.
and
And
the
they can't hear
sirens
you.
on.
Yeah.
And that was actually a good point during the IRC incident, that I could not understand what they were saying because of the fire alarms and people yelling and and they couldn't hear me either because they were in the midst of all that. Yeah, it's something to think about that you wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, and as an officer, you have to balance the loudness of your radio,
Yeah.
because that is a beacon of saying, shoot me, I'm over
Yes,
here.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so your officers have entered the south building of the IRC building, and what are you hearing over the radio? What's going on between the interaction between the search team and yourself?
Just based on a good relationship with the patrol guys who had been there on scene, and from friends who are patrol guys, I knew kind of what to expect from a tactical perspective. So I knew they were going to team up in a team of 4 or so, and then go in together to the building. So there was a little bit of chatter back and forth between them as to who was going to team up with whom and which entrance they were going to make on the building. Just previous to that, we actually had people on the phone calling in, and they could hear gunshots over the phone. So I was a little bit concerned that the suspect was still in the building, and so I needed to make sure everybody had enough team people before they went in there. And I needed to know who those team people were so that we could keep account of them in the right parts of the building.
And was there any difficulty in the communication itself over the radio?
There was. When the shooter was inside the building and shots were fired, it set the fire alarms off. So the water was spraying. There was gunpowder literally still in the air. I guess it's gunpowder. You know, the gun stuff. And the fire alarms were going off. And so it was extremely loud in there. Plus you had all the people, the victims, the people who were trying to get out and trying to get the attention of the officers that were talking and yelling. And it was fairly chaotic on the inside from what I understand. And you could hear that when the officers keyed up. The reception was not fantastic to begin with, and to have that on top of the distracting noise that was on the inside made communication a little difficult.
So you heard the background noise.
Yep.
And I would assume, safely, I'd like to think, that the officers had difficulty hearing you because that background noise for them was actually present right in front of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know the motor guy who was first on scene, I believe still had his helmet mic. I honestly don't know the answer to that. And those can be difficult to begin with to hear. And then the other guys, they were not set up to be tactical by any means. They had what they had with them and they went in based on that. And so they didn't have the optimal experience of entering the building.
Typical team.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So you had a motor officer,
motor guy.
You had a communications manager, lieutenant.
Yep.
You had one patrol officer.
Yep.
And then you had a detective filling in overtime working patrol.
Yes, exactly.
So
it was his, I think, first patrol experience in a couple of years at least.
Oh my goodness.
First day. Yeah.
Right. So and that by itself is an unusual grouping of individuals, albeit all police officers, but still these gentlemen typically don't work together.
No, they don't. And it sounds like, again, this goes back to training. It sounds like their training and the way they, their expectations they had as to how that formation was going to work and how they were going to go in, it went perfectly.